So I'm going to ask Neale Petersen. Neale is the founder and chief in charge of the Real Estate Investor magazine. He lives, breathes, and also educates the investors today in the market. And I think there should be nobody better to help us to understand the real needs of the investor and some of the current market challenges that property managers should be aware of to be able to structure their value offering to address those as well and add that extra bit of value. So Neale, the word in landlord is that thing that I hear often, and I cringe if I hear it. And yes, our clients are landlords, but long before they became a landlord, they were an investor. And like any investor, they have needs of an investor. Chat to us about this phenomenon of a landlord and an investor, and what the real needs are of our investors and what they are looking for in property managers today.
Awesome. Great. Thank you very much for inviting me, Johann. Really excited to address the audience. I mean, we've been around for 17 years, believe it or not. I came in as a private investor, and a lot of the stuff that I've applied to my business today and offering a service to you, the industry, was obviously being a private investor myself. And that's when I decided to share this knowledge through, the Real Estate Investor magazine that we publish monthly. And now we're a digital platform, and we do also a number of property events and bespoke property events and webinars and that kind of stuff over the years. And I've also had the fortune, and, like Bruce, he's also interviewed a wonderful people and interesting people in the world, businessmen, property gurus, etc. In 2011, I actually met Donald Trump before he was the US president, believe it or not. And that was a once in a lifetime, a very interesting opportunity. And he told me in 2011, South Africa was in trouble. And I don't know what, if he had a view into the future, but he made that statement. However, we're not here to discuss that. So I think let's talk a little bit about the investor per se. And as Johann said, I've been very fortunate to be exposed to a number of people locally in the industry who are leaders, who are investors, who are managing assets. And typically, at the end of the day, it's got to work from a financial perspective. So effective property management at the end of the day is where the rubber really hits the road for any kind of managing any property. Effective property management contributes to tenant satisfaction, property appreciation, and overall profitability for the investor. So it's not without its challenges. You're dealing with difficult tenants, maintaining the property condition, and you balancing those very important multiple financial obligations. And as we heard this morning, from Donnie explaining, the different versions of how we can do that. So I think if we employ the term rental asset managers instead of property managers, we then characterize individuals that are tasked with proactive management of property assets. You really make them dedicated to optimizing the performance and the value of each asset within a portfolio. So yes, and if you look at a typical asset manager, the focus extends beyond individual properties. I mean, it's based on, we spoke a little bit earlier on about sort of supply and demand. And when there's high demand and limited supply, rental prices increase. So other things are the economic conditions. We spoke about inflation, interest rates, etc. Location, and obviously semigration has created, better performing market sectors. And yes, this is ongoing, and we're going to go through multiple property cycles, and we're always going to be challenged financially. So I just want to sort of lock into a little bit of the investor itself. And, I use myself also as an example that manages assets myself. and then the question would be, well, why is that? So if we start looking and we start unpacking the private property investor, and we find that a number of private property investors tend to manage their own assets. And there's a number of reasons for that. And we spoke a lot about the sort of the finances, the how we mitigate costs and risk management strategies, but at the same time, offering a service that complements that's in alignment with our assets. And I think the most important thing, for a property or asset manager, if you want to improve and grow or get an investor on your side, you really need to understand that investors' needs, the age analysis of their properties, how those properties are performing. We've noticed that in the last sort of 5 years or so, if you've purchased a property recently, we're going to probably find, and that could be, and I say recent, in the last, say, 7 years, we probably find that those properties are highly leveraged. There's a bond against them, and there's a number of other costs, and so therefore, to get into a situation where it's cash flow positive and where we manage these ongoing utilities that are increasing at an ongoing rate, and levies and all the other electricity costs, etc., which impacts both sides. And if we don't get sort of control of that, it really, we need to understand it. And I think that's really what we need to understand. Where is the investor stroke landlord? Where are they based? If it's a portfolio of properties which are 20 years and older, the cost challenge tends to be slightly less. And if we start looking, and we've discussed all the things that, in terms of what's impacting. I mean, we've seen a number of players come into sort of the prop tech who've tried to disrupt the sector through pure cost. And we saw failures in that particular one because it seemed that business model was not successful. But it doesn't mean that there's not going to be somebody else new that's going to come along and disrupt. And my message to you, and I think that WeConnectU play a fantastic role. I think if we look at property management software and tech that's out there, it's probably the leaders that are in the property management field. They're the most successful area of prop tech today. So I think WeConnectU's platform plays a critical role, I think, for investors. However, we still need to get the investor mindset to shift, to move from that Excel spreadsheet onto using more software. So what's the challenge? We need to start looking at, first of all, well, what is the easiest thing that we can do? So we saw these different strategies where the most obvious one is, how do we reduce costs? So, and it's easy to say to an investor, to say to a property manager, well, just lower your property management commissions. And we looked at that scale where what the impact could be, where service levels could drop. But I think one of the trends that we're also seeing more recently is we're seeing a number of property managers who are just doing placements, and they do a once-off placement and they hand over the property management back over to the investor to kind of deal with themselves. And what the investor normally does, they employ their own property managers and essentially manage it at a much lower cost that is typically competitive with a traditional property management service. So,
look, I want to use that point. I want to ask you, sorry to interrupt. I want to ask you there. If we say that the investors are investors first before we've made them landlords, and we get into a point that they say, but I'll rather manage myself. Now, maybe I'm going to share a short slide just to confirm what you've just said. I'm just going to quickly share a slide here to confirm the stat that you've just mentioned about the investors starting or continuing to potentially manage self. This is research we've done over the last 2 years to ask clients who, let me just stop there. Sorry, I've just shared the wrong slide there. Give me one moment. There we go. Why are you losing mandates? And what you've just said has been confirmed with the research. The highest, almost 30%, of clients are losing mandates to the client themselves. I don't think that investors go into property to work with tenants, broken geezers, and maintenance management of a door that doesn't open. Isn't that because we are missing their need? Investor, basic 101, they invest for a return. They would like to reduce their risk. They would like good reporting. They would like guidance to help grow their portfolio. Do you feel that the industry is doing that? Or are we seen by investors as merely administrators to find the tenant, collect the rent, do maintenance management? What is your, if you can answer, help me there, because I think the fact that there's a trend where potential investors saying, but listen, man, I'm not getting the value here, and I'll rather opt to manage self. I don't think they started with that in mind. I think they end up there because the potential value gap that exists.
Absolutely. So, I mean, if you want to grow scale and you've got a big property portfolio, there's no ways. And I would say anything north of 3, 4, 5 properties, you don't want to self-manage. You don't want to get the call at midnight and say, fix a toilet and, all kind of problems and fix geysers and that kind of stuff. So that's certainly something that you do not want to get involved in. And yes, look, I think it comes down to the property manager stroke asset manager really getting to understand their purpose and how they can help and make a difference for the investor. And I don't think there's sort of a silver bullet approach. There's not a one size fits all approach. And I think this is where the asset managers must either target certain particular investors that own a large portfolio. I mean, if it's a standalone building, for example, it is a lot easier to manage and to bring your management costs down. It's much easier to do that if it's all in one sort of location. So my feeling is that investors are absolutely open. If they can get a deal where they could get the value return in terms of on the balance sheet, they absolutely would pass it over. And there's evidence of that all the time. We've seen in the listed property sector, for example, most of asset management has actually gone to the company that actually owns the assets. So there's less outsourcing of property management or asset management functions in the commercial sector. So Rezi, we've got to address this investor, and certainly the industry can help. And I agree, it's not just offering an administrative system; it's really offering something of significant value. There's a mindset change. There's an absolute mindset change, and I think it comes from engaging with the investor and really getting to understand what they're trying to achieve and where they can bring that value. And remember, you get paid for helping people. So, and the most reliable source of information you can get is through observation. So you've got to go on site and really have a look around and understand what is that investor trying to achieve and where you can bring the value to that. And
we're just checking the time. Apologies. Maybe
yes.
Just a closing remark on the investor and the core needs.
End of the day, the investor wants to get a return on investment. That's it. They cannot do it alone. They need to have partners in the business. They do need property asset managers. I can tell you now, they do not enjoy managing their own assets. And if you could bring the value, they would absolutely employ you any day of the week. So I think that's and I always say that, sort of collaboration wins wars. We don't want to be at a situation where we're in a tense situation about rental collection and that. Communicate all the time. No communication is no money, and it's the biggest enemy of money.
Neale,